Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Ogunshaki and I'm starting with Vanguard on the paper review. Vanguard, the major headline says that Tinubu seized the Benin Republic airspace legally. That's coming from Senate source. Top army officers taken hostage in coup attempt are released. Benin Ford coup shows Tinubu's role in West Africa's stability. That's coming from Presidency. ADC to federal government, if you can act in Benin overnight, why not protect Nigerians? Senator Barau hails Tinubu, says democracy remains best option. You can see that story on page 5 of Vanguard newspaper. On page 9, federal government to court. Speed up hearing of terrorism, kidnapped cases. 100 students released by terrorists handed over to Niger government. And lastly, on the Vanguard newspaper on page 19, federal government bans a cash payment for its services. Now, away from Vanguard, we move to the Punch. The Punch major headline says the federal government defers 70% of 2025 capital projects to 2026. Government stops new projects, imposes a spending limit, 22.37 trillion naira budgeted for 2026 capital expenditure. POS takeover, federal government ends cash payments in MDAs. You can see that story on page 26. Now, the Guardian's major headline says, Foiled Beneku, how Nigeria's intervention secured key trade routes, regional supply chain. You can see that story on page 6. Iowa inches Tinubu's 2027 fate on economy, security scorecard. PDP faces a growing 2027 uncertainty as factional dispute escalates. And lastly, on the Guardian newspaper, Reps issues NNPCL boss December 15 appearance deadline. You can see that story on newspaper 13 of the Guardian newspaper. And that's all we have on the front pages of the dailies this morning. Join us after the break for a brief analysis of some of the stories. Welcome back. If you're just joining me, this is Today the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Ogunshaki, and joining me to analyze some of the stories on the front pages this morning is Mr. Dayo Akitobi, publisher of Illipeju Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. Good morning, Mr. Dayo.
Good morning, Damlola. Good morning to all of you.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Now, let's talk about Benin Republic. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu says it requires at least 14 days to consult the Senate for approval in the event of troops deployment for combat operations in another country. And it was disclosed that it gives the backdrops of claims in some quarters that the president needed to seek the Senate approval 24 hours before or after deployment of troops. But before we go into that, what do you think about the coup attempt in Benin Republic and the role Nigeria played in helping seize back democracy in the country?
Well, the issue of coup seems to be quite prevalent lately, with quite a few countries in the West African sub-region having suffered the fate of coups supplanting democracy. Well, my belief simply is that the specter of a coup can only come into existence when there is mass discontent from the populace. The military will always use an excuse of the fact that the democratic dispensation was not delivering dividends of democracy to the people, and that the people were not happy. And that's why they stepped in. They usually say, oh, the administration was corrupt, that they were self-interested, they were full of bad governance, they were stealing. They will lay all these allegations. But those allegations can only find a fertile ground if the public is dissatisfied with the way their leaders are governing. If leaders are governing well and the people are happy and their quality of life is improving and there's mass infrastructural development and people look around them and they see the gains of democracy, a military coup can never happen in such an environment. It can't. I don't care if the army has guns. I don't care what they have. As long as the public is happy. So what I'm essentially saying is what we are seeing across West Africa is as a result of bad governance. It's as a result of public misery. They say there's something called the Human Development Index. Most of these countries are failing to meet up to them in terms of things like education, health, infrastructure, all the things that matter to a good quality of life. Many of those administrations are failing to provide those things for their people, and their people are wretched and miserable. So that just opens the door for military intervention under the excuse. Don't get it wrong, the military will not do any better. The very same things that they are accusing the politicians of doing, and the very same reasons why they are pushing the politicians out, the military will even do worse when they get in. What I'm saying is the basis, the excuse for it is largely handed to them by the existing political structure. They open the door for the military to put their boots in. They're the ones. So the Benin Republic is the latest. It seems like they managed to fight it back off and restore democracy or stop it from succeeding. So we give glory to God for that. That's a good thing. But it should sound a warning bell to those who are leading that country that they need to buckle up. And to all other countries in the sub-region as well, that civilian administrations that have been entrusted with the public commonwealth and the suffragists should do their best to meet the needs of their people. Now, having said that, that is the situation in Benin. That's my feeling, is that it could only come to pass because the leaders in those countries, in Benin and in the other African countries that have suffered coups recently, are not doing what they need to do. Okay, now, in terms of whether President Tinubu was constitutionally correct in taking that action, in situations of emergency, you don't have time to wait. I don't care. There's something called the War Powers Act. In situations of emergency, where you need to act right away, there's no time to wait for Senate to pass a resolution or House of Assembly for you to start writing to them to request permission. So there's exemptions, yes, quite all right. To go to war, the president needs the concurrence of the National Assembly. Why is that? Primarily because of funding, really. It's mostly because the money to prosecute the war has to be approved by National Assembly. Not that he's getting their permission to go and fight. He, as the executive, is the one who, and commander-in-chief is the one who knows what he needs to do to secure the country. So he doesn't need to get permission. The legislature, they pass laws. They don't know anything about war strategy or national security. They don't know anything about it. That's not their purview. Their own is to release the purse strings. So anytime he wants to go to war is a very expensive effort. Mobilizing troops, getting consumables, weapons, ammunition, all that is very, very expensive. So it can't be covered under the normal budget of the normal security budget. So there's been an extra budgetary allocation, appropriation to go to war. That's what he needs to go and request permission for. And in an emergency situation, no time. You just scramble the jets immediately and send them up into the air. Imagine if Nigeria is under invasion and some country is at our border and threatening to cross. Will it just be waiting in the middle of the night to wait for Senate to convene? No, it doesn't happen that way. So it was well within his powers to react immediately as he did, to respond to heed to the call. And you ask that what was a big brother in the subcontinental sub-region and look after or defend its brother, because Nigeria and Benin Republic have had a very close relationship for a long time. Matter of fact, there are some Beninua who have Nigerian roots. There are some parts of Benin, there are Yoruba-speaking people. So historically, parts of Benin and Nigeria were amalgamated. It's when the colonial masters came and redrew all these maps that separated people of the same background. So, and fortunately, our leaders over the years from independence have continued to nurture that brotherly closeness with Benin Republic. So if they're in trouble and they call out for help, it's only natural that we would rise up immediately as a good big brother. I mean, compare the size of Benin to the size of Nigeria, compare our powers. So we played a proper role in that, and I believe what we've done is nurture a deeper symbiotic togetherness with Republic of Benin, because they cried out for help. We rose up to the occasion, and our intervention helped in putting down this insurrection or putting down this attempted coup. So they won't forget it for a long time, they will feel very indebted to us, that they're grateful for our intervention. And the bottom line is this: irrespective of the discontent of the people of Republic of Benin, the present administration is the legitimate government. They were rightfully elected. They were properly sworn in. The fact that they may not be doing what they were elected to do and the people are not happy is an entirely different issue. The point is, this current government in Benin is legitimate. The coupists that are trying to come in and take over, they are illegitimate because they have no legal basis. Unlike this administration that has the suffrages, it has the will of the people as expressed at the ballot box. So anybody who is coming in to try and take that away other than through an election. And what really is funny to me is they have an election upcoming in a few months. And the person who is the current president has finished his tenure, so he's leaving. So I'm trying to understand what was the purpose or what were they trying to achieve. It's not as if he's a sit-tight leader who said, I'm not leaving. You know, all of these other African presidents who have passed constitutional amendments that make them president for life, this sit-tight syndrome. I didn't get any sense that he was like that. He's done 10 years. I think 2 terms of 5 years each. And he was one of the ones advocating actually a 5-year, one single term. So he was leaving in a few months' time. So what were the coupists trying to achieve? I don't really understand at all. Because he didn't say he was cancelling elections. He didn't say he was holding. Oh no, the truth be told, here is a tyrant. That he's been oppressing all the opposition figures, all those who want to run in the election, or those who are in the opposition against his government. He's been quite repressive. But he didn't say he's cancelling the elections. And he didn't say he's outlawing all the political parties so as to make himself the only candidate. So I don't really understand what the whole purpose of the coup was. I don't get it. But as I said earlier, no, I don't think President Tinubu acted outside his powers. I don't think so. And I think what he did was necessary and was morally upright.
So this our role, in getting the democracy back for Niger, does this signal Nigeria as a security guarantor in West Africa? Despite our own security challenges.
Well, yeah, it's an oversimplification of the problem to say that, well, they were able to go to another country, go and bomb, precision bombing, and, take the coupists out because it's an oversimplification. They're not the same issue. First of all, remember that our insecurity is widespread. In this particular case, the coupists were in 1 or 2 isolated places, and the government of Benin was able to pinpoint where they were and tell Nigeria that this is where you need to go to help secure our nation. Our own insecurity problem. First of all, remember, a lot of the times, the bandits and terrorists in Nigeria have victims, kidnapped victims in their custody that they are using as human shields. So if you say you want to do precision airstrikes like they did in Benin, there will be collateral damage. What is that collateral damage? It's our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers who are in captivity. So we can't just carpet bomb everywhere in Sambisa forest and just start dropping bombs from the sky without suffering heavy civilian casualties. So the military has to use a different strategy, different tactic in addressing our own insecurity than what they did in Benin Republic. Now, does that mean that because we had that success, does it mean all of a sudden that we are the policeman for the whole West Africa? No, it doesn't mean that. But what it means is that Nigeria has shown that as the most populous black country in the world, as the most populous black country in Africa, as one of the strongest economically, politically, and socially in the sub-region and in the continent, we have made it known that you can't mess with us. Even if we have our own internal problems, right, that we've not been able to address or we've not been able to completely succeed at arresting, any external aggression will be met with force. That's the message we sent. That look, everybody around us should not take the fact that we've not been able to solve our insecurity problem. They should not take it for weakness on our part. Because remember, part of our insecurity, part of the claim is that people are coming across our borders, Mali, from Cameroon, from Chad, Burkina Faso, that many of the bandits are coming from other countries. So if they begin to look at us as weak and we begin to have people infiltrating from our borders, it could worsen our security problems. So what Nigeria has done is send a message out that, look, external aggression, we won't tolerate it, and we have the fighting capability to ward off any form of attack, even because mass migration of bandits and terrorists from the Sahel into Nigeria is a problem. It's a problem that needs to be addressed militarily. So I think we sent a resounding message, while not necessarily saying we are the police of everybody or giving us bragging rights that if anybody should dare step out of line, we'll deal with them. No. But we sent a message that you can't mess with us, that we are strong and we will not hesitate to use our power to contain our own internal, our own territorial integrity. We will defend it at all costs. So nobody should have any ideas of thinking that they can send bandits, send terrorists to enter into our country to come and start fomenting mayhem.
But won't it raise a suspicion among neighbors about Nigerians' motive and also dominance, or do you think it will help strengthen security forces more, intelligence in terms of intelligence sharing and others?
Let me tell you something. Let's not kid ourselves. If Nigeria wanted to overrun both Benin Republic, Togo, if Nigeria wanted to annex those countries as additional states, we could have done it a long time ago. We can overrun them in no time at all because we have the power, we have the money, we have the means. But Nigeria is a country that respects sovereignty. Nigeria is a country that has harmonious relationship with its neighbors. So we will never do that. So I would say that the step we have taken should inspire confidence in our neighbors that they too are safe. That if anybody threatens them, they know that Big Brother will stand up for them. That's what it should do. It should make them feel a bit better about their own situation, not worse. I think that yes, intelligence sharing is very important because a lot of what is happening in our own country, some of it is emanating from the countries surrounding us. So I think maybe what happened should lend itself to greater levels of cooperation, intelligence sharing, even the ability to allow us to enter your country to perhaps do some military maneuvers against stopping people from coming to cross our borders. There are various ways they can cooperate. And I think what happened recently will let other countries be more benevolent towards cooperating with us, because now that they see that as a big brother, we care about all those around us, and we will rise up to the occasion to defend them. I think that they too will reciprocate in like manner and be more open to assisting in our own security problem.
Well, according to reports, a Nigerian Air Force NAV flight was grounded in Burkina Faso over alleged airspace violation. What do you think about it? Was the grounding of this of NAV, was it justified?
Well, I don't quite know all the details of that story, but I will tell you that international conventions require that if you are entering the airspace of an independent sovereign nation, you must notify them because they don't know if it's a friend or foe that's coming. So they won't just sit there and be looking and see on their screens, on their radar screens, that a foreign object has entered their airspace. They don't know if you are coming to attack or if you are coming to embrace. So it's the rightful thing is that international conventions demand that the courtesy, you have to notify them if you want to pass through the airspace. We don't know if this NAF jet, if part of the mission to rescue Benin is strayed out of its course. We don't know what the exact, because I caution us to be very careful about what we read on social media, unless you get official declarations from official sources, federal government, the army, the Air Force, until they actually give a press release explaining. Everything else is speculation. But what we do know for sure is that a Nigerian jet strayed into Burkinabe's airspace, and it was escorted to one of their naval bases, and it was seized. So diplomatic solution is what is called for. Nigeria has to now approach the situation and explain itself. I'm sure Burkina Faso knows that they were not under threat. I mean, once they identified the aircraft as Nigeria, I'm sure they knew it was not coming to attack them and that they were not under any danger at any time. But protocol demands that they must go through a process. Of course, Nigeria must explain, Nigeria must apologize, and Nigeria must make amends. They will release our jet to us because I don't believe that there's any animosity between Nigeria and Burkina Faso, although Burkina Faso is under military rule. Burkina Faso has pulled out of ECOWAS. Burkina Faso is one of those that is getting closer and closer to Russia and China. So those countries that are under military rule in West Africa, they seem to be isolating themselves from the ECOWAS bloc. But isolating themselves and wanting to go on their own does not mean we are their enemy. We have no animosity against them because they left ECOWAS, and I'm sure they know this. So they cannot really be thinking that the jet was coming for any nefarious activity, whether to spy or to attack or to do surveillance. I'm sure they know it was not that. It was an honest mistake. Either it was going somewhere else and entered the airspace inadvertently, or there was some error of communication where they did not notify and seek permission to use that airspace. But it is international convention that anybody will always monitor his airspace and will immediately interrogate the presence of any unidentified or unpermitted external entity that strays into his airspace. It's very important for national defense, for national security. Any country that overlooks that is not serious about defending its borders. So the problem will be resolved, I'm sure, diplomatically. But it happens from time to time. Look, a situation, a process that's manned by human beings is always subject to error. Well, we can never be perfect. So things can and do go wrong. But in this case, I want to believe it was an honest mistake and that there was no nefarious intent behind that aircraft straying into that airspace unpermitted.
All right, let's move away from that story. Now, the federal government has ordered ministries, departments, and agencies to carry over 70% of their 2025 capital budget into the 2026 fiscal year as the administration moves to prioritize the completion of existing projects. Now, what do you think are the major reasons that federal government is deferring up to 70% of its 2025 capital project to 2026?
Well, what that means is that only 30% implementation has occurred, which is really very poor. I would say part of the problem is funding, because remember, we had a budget deficit. When they presented the budget, their projections for income, because the budget has two sides to it. It has the income and the expenditure side. So they projected the income based on the dollar rates against the international dollar rate exchange against the naira, how many barrels of oil that they would pump per day, and then the international price of oil. So they projected that this is how much we will earn for 2025. Then they made a list of all the expenses, salaries, pensions, running costs, and then, of course, capital expenditure to build roads, bridges, all those things that make for a good quality of life. When they presented that budget initially, there was a deficit. What that means is that what they said they needed to spend exceeded the income they were expecting. So they were going to have to go and borrow money. Now, the assumptions they made in predicting the income, those assumptions have not held true. Oil is trading at a lesser price per barrel than the assumption they used in the budget. I believe the exchange rate might not be as good as they also projected. And then perhaps they are not pumping as many barrels as they thought they would. So the income is even less than what they projected. And possibly the expenses are more. which means the deficit is wider, which means they have to borrow more than they anticipated. So the reason for deferring 70% of it into next year is plain and simple. There is no money. The money is not enough to cover what needs to be spent. So they've pushed it over into next year. But what would that do to next year's budget, for example? Now, even as we speak, I think we are still implementing part of 2024 budget. I don't think we've finished implementing the full 2024. I think we carried part of it over to 2025, and now we're carrying 2025 over to 2026. Well, bottom line simply is that for all of the reforms and for all the gains that the reforms are giving us in the country, the bottom line still is that we are spending more than we are earning, and it's leading to borrowing. That can never, at the end of the day, be a good state of affairs. So something has to give somewhere. As I said, there are two sides in any budget. There's income, there's expenditure. So there are two ways you can go about it. Number one, you can increase income. Number two, you can decrease expenditure. How do you increase income? If over things you don't have control, like price of oil in international market and things like how many barrels of oil you pump a day. Sometimes you don't have control over that. They can declare force majeure. Militants get too many leakages. There's too much corruption. There's too much theft. There's too much lavishness. You see 50-car convoys and you see 400 people going to COP25, and you see when they go to United Nations for the General Assembly, you see the size of the delegation. You see government sponsoring Hajj and sponsoring pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and there's all kinds of ways we can cut government spending. So those are some of the things that can help in terms of this budget deficit, and that's why if they're carrying over 70% to next year, what do you think has actually been achieved within the 30%? I'm sure much of the 30% is recurrent expenditure, which means salaries, pensions. So they're just marking time. There's not much within that 30%. There can't be much development of infrastructure. There can't be that much investment in education and healthcare and the environment, because 30% is very, very low. So I'm sure a vast majority of it is recurrent expenditure, which means that not much development is occurring at this time. Not much, which is sad.
Well, like you said, 70%, project rollover is a large-scale one. So, with the budget, should we expect a more supplementary budget or further adjustment to 2026 budget?
It's quite likely, yes, because if you are pushing 70% of your developmental requirements to another year, then when January comes and the 2026 budget is brought up and you are still dealing with 2025 issues, of course you end up with supplementaries. Because sudden there is a lag between what you carried over from 2025 and what you need to do for 2026. So supplementary budgets are untidy, but they become a necessity if we're not keeping up with the schedule as predicted. So I don't see how we can escape supplementary. We'll have to do them here and there. But nonetheless, the bottom line, we need to increase our income and reduce our expenditure so that there can be more of a parity in the budget and implementation can be more efficient than just 30% in terms of in terms of capital expenditure.
So, but are we likely to see state increase internal borrowing as a response? And do you think there should be more checks on the reasons why some of the states are borrowing? Because for example, Kebbi State, there are 10 billion naira for Hajj. So what's your take on this?
Well, yeah, when I was talking about some of the expenses, I mentioned the Hajj and pilgrimage to Jerusalem as some of the drains of government expenditure. But the purpose of the House of Assembly and the House of Reps or National Assembly is to act as a check on the executive in terms of spending. Remember, it's the executive that does all the spending, both at state and federal and local government level. It's the executive. The judiciary and the legislators, They just have running costs. They don't necessarily, they don't spend on defense, spend on health, spend on education. Yeah, apart from their constituency allowances for projects, they basically sit as oversight, checks and balances on the executive, because it's the executive that does the administration of the country, which is where the spending comes in. But the failure occurs in that the houses of assembly are usually subservient to the governor, so they don't act as a check and balance. Like the National Assembly we have now is also not a check and balance on our presidency. You know, so once their oversight function is not being done, how will Kebi governor not spend 10 billion on Hajj? The people that are supposed to check him on that are his House of Assembly, but his House of Assembly probably were handpicked by him and will rubber stamp anything he brings in front of them. So it's a continuous problem that you can't rein in the governors, because the only people that have the wherewithal to check him are in his pocket already. So this is why we see these kind of things, and like, who's going to stop him from spending 10 billion on Hajj? You and I can complain all day long on TV that a state that needs investment in security, if he put that 10 billion in a security trust fund to put the police, to equip the police in his state, kidnappings will drop, reduce. But look at his priority. He has chosen to do. Who can stop him? The experience is that the checks and balances that were written into the system. See, the three branches of government are supposed to check each other. The legislature writes the law, the judiciary interprets it, the executive implements it. That's the bottom line. They are not supposed to have any incestuous interaction whatsoever. That is the theory, political science theory. They're supposed to be independent and be a check against each other. But in our own democracy, it doesn't work like that. Rather, if they are all in lockstep with each other, to where they are signing off on each other's shenanigans. And so the ordinary Nigerian is the worst off for it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dio, for joining us this morning.
My pleasure always. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yes, have a lovely day. Well, this is where we have to draw the curtain today. My name is Damlola Ogunshaki. Do want to like and follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. You can also visit our website, www.vanguardngr.com.